Hello everyone, my name is Matt.
And I'm Brianna.
And we are here with your Iowa State Weekly News. This week we have a pretty special topic. Your president, Wendy Winterstein, asked us to cover health insurance and for you guys as students what it may entail in the future. So let's get started. There's several aspects to health insurance. Health insurance is more like a contract that you make with an insurance company. There's a lot of different moving aspects of health insurance, but we're going to cover a couple today. The first thing we need to know is what is a deductible. A deductible is the baseline amount of money you need to spend before your insurance starts kicking in and covering any of your costs. After a deductible, you have several different options, and these options can all be unique to you and your plan. There's this thing called a copay, and with a copay, it is a flat fee that you pay with, let's say, a medication, and then the insurance company will cover the rest of the costs. There's also a co-insurance option as well. This is where you pay a select percentage of a medication and then the insurance will cover the rest of the percentage. When we have these different plans, we need to look at the insurance company and what they have to offer. Each insurance company and each plan has this thing called a formulary. With a formulary, this is a list of all the drugs that the insurance company will cover as well as the prices of these drugs. These fall back into different tiers on a formulary, most likely categorized by the cost of the medication. So what are the differences between these medications? Well, you have your generic drugs and then you have your name brand drugs. With your generic drugs, there's really only one difference between the two, and that's the price. The generic drugs themselves are pretty much made of all the same materials and same medications. They've both been approved by the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, but the only key difference is the patent on their name. Bree will explain a little bit more in depth about this topic.
So it's a common misconception that generic drugs are worse than their name brand counterparts, and usually it's because they're cheaper. A lot of people think that that means that they are worse or they have more side effects, and that's not really true. As Matt said, they have the same active ingredients and they're pretty much the same drug, just less expensive. And this is because of patenting process. The process itself is pretty muddy to go through, but I'll just try to explain it briefly. The name brand company, when they develop a drug, they put a patent on it which prevents other generic companies from making it for a certain number of years. But once that patent expires, the other companies are free to make the generic, and since they don't have to put a lot of money into the planning and developing phase, that was already done by the name brand company, they're able to produce the drug and sell it for a much cheaper rate. So the lower price that you see is not reflective of the quality, but instead just because they were able to save money in the process.
So now that we know a little bit more about name brand and generic drugs, we're going to kind of take a look at something that you may see. An example we're going to use here is what Iowa State University offers their faculty members. So as we looked at earlier, for any faculty members, you have the differences between generic and name brand drugs, as well as the day's supply that medication is offered. If we start to look at the out-of-pocket maximum, we see that with this deductible plan that you can have a $1,500 deductible for a year, or you can have a $3,000 deductible for a spouse, partner, child, or family, etc. So with that, that's the price that a faculty member will have to pay before insurance starts covering their expenses. As we start to look at the medication part of the Iowa State healthcare option, you have your 30-day supply of medication. And if a medication is considered generic, it's a $10 copay. So whatever medication you're given, you'll pay $10 and insurance will cover the rest of the pricing. But if it's a name brand medication, then you have to pay for co-insurance. And this is where you yourself would have to pay 30 or 50% of the drug price, and then the rest would be covered by your insurance. The same aspect goes for the 90-day supply, except for the dollar amount is increased. But this makes sense because you'll be getting medication for a longer period of time. So really, if we start to compare and contrast the Iowa State healthcare options to maybe other healthcare options, you can see that Iowa State as an institution would prefer you get the generic medication. This is typically a better deal in this type of healthcare plan, but as we may compare and contrast later, there may be other insurance companies which prefer you select the name brand product.
So you're probably wondering why we're talking about all this anyway. And it's pretty clear that there is a communication and an ethical issue when it comes to medication coverage in insurance companies. As an ethical standpoint, pharmaceutical companies are cutting deals with insurance companies to cover their name brand drugs instead of the generic versions. This saves the insurers money, but makes customers pay more in the long run. In fact, looking back to the idea of a deductible that Matt was talking about earlier, this puts people in a position where they're either having to pay the sticker price of the name brand drug toward their deductible, which could be upwards of thousands of dollars, or having to pay out of pocket for the generic and not making any payments toward that deductible in the long run. And as a communication standpoint, a lot of people don't know what their insurance actually covers. It's difficult to find the information online, and not a lot of people know who the primary contact would be when it comes to questions about their healthcare insurance. So with all that, let's go ahead and take a look at my personal insurance, United Healthcare, and some of the issues brought up there. Here's a snippet of United Healthcare's most recent formulary. In the first column, we can see the names of the drugs. The ones that are in bold are name brand, and the ones that are in normal font are the generic versions. The second column shows the tier that they're categorized in, and the third column are abbreviations for certain characteristics of the drug, whether they require prior authorization, if they have a supply limit, or if they're a specialty medication. We don't really need to concern ourselves with a third column when looking at this for now. The important thing to note right off the bat is that there's only one generic version covered, and this is generic Copaxone. This drug has a very similar effect to the Avonex, which is the name brand listed above, and they are both used to reduce the frequency of relapses or flare-ups in people with multiple sclerosis. A relapse is when there's new damage to the brain or spinal cord, and this disrupts the nerve signals there. Both of these drugs, though, are tier 2, which means that they're going to be similar in price, so therefore having the coverage of that generic doesn't really do the person any benefit. Another important thing to look at is the drug Ampyra. So this drug has a very different clinical effect than the other two we just looked at. This one has been known to improve walking in people suffering with multiple sclerosis. There is a generic version available for sale. However, United Healthcare does not cover this one. And when we look at the price difference between the two, we have Ampyra, which per unit cost is $51.21. So when you are ordering a 60-day supply, you get a grand total of more than $3,000. But the generic, on the other hand, is significantly less per unit. It's only $3.08. So when you get a 60-day fill, you're only spending about $184. So looking at the price difference of the coverage of United Healthcare shows exactly why this is a problem. The financial burden that this puts on people can put them in a really tough position. Everyone struggles with their own financial insecurity at some point, and so the companies doing this and exploiting people is something we need to fix.
So what can we do about it? We've identified that this is a communication issue as well as an ethical issue in terms of the insurance and drug companies. From sitting in your shoes, something that you can do when looking at a health insurance plan is look at all the different facets that it includes. Beyond that, whenever you do see a physician or go into a hospital or are looking for medication, ask questions. Try to develop that background so that you know what you're being given and how it works with your plan. There are different ways for physicians to help as well as government policies, but in terms of what you can do, ask questions and advocate for yourself. You always should stick up for yourself, and that's the best way for you to find the best plan for you as well as get the right deal for you.
Thank you so much for watching, and we hope you tune in next week.
Go Cyclones, horns down.